Mini episode 1067 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1067. We have one of our most long-standing FDH Lounge dignitaries back on with us today, doing what we usually do somewhere around this time of year, taking a look at the early season NHL landscape. So it is, of course, our good friend, FDH Lounge dignitary and Sportsology proprietor, Russ Cohen, coming back on the show here. You can catch him, of course, on Sirius XM, talking hockey prospects every weekend on that great show, and joining the NHL Sirius channel in between, talking other topics as well as the prospects and whatnot. But today we're just taking kind of a general look around the NHL landscape, a little bit into the season here, about a month out from the Winter Classic, which Russ is always at and has famously written about as one of his many hockey books. So, Russ, good to have you back on, my man. How's things going for you these days?
Pretty good, Rick. Enjoying it. Like you said, Hockey Prospect Radio is in full swing, so that's fun. And the Winter Classic's coming up, so that's fun. World Juniors, in between of that. So it's a great time of the year. This year I won't be at the World Juniors, but I've been at a lot of them. But I will be at the Winter Classic, so I have to figure out how I'm going to do it. I may drive, because I hear that the South Bend Airport is kind of like a pain. So driving may work.
It is, but I will tell you from experience, because my brother went to Notre Dame, that's like a mini version of Kansas when you are driving past Toledo to get out there. I mean, it is just endless and endless and endless. So
I've been to Toledo once in my life.
All right.
And I'm not looking forward to going through there again, but I've been there. We went to that Cedar Point park, but I didn't ride the big roller coaster. I was afraid.
Cedar Point, yeah, I'm not a coaster guy myself. Cedar Point
I am to some degree, but this was like upside down, all around. It was too much.
I'm actually not. Good old Ricky's kind of a vajayjay when it comes to riding those things because of my issue with heights. So, problems with heights and roller coasters do not go hand in hand. But, Cedar Point is an outstanding park all the way around. But, yeah, you're right. There's not much to recommend Toledo. It's not nice for me to say, but I'll say it. But, you get beyond that, and it's a long drive to get to South Bend, let me tell you. But my brother was at the Notre Dame-Michigan game, and that was when he found out about the Winter Classic, and he texted me from there, "Oh, you should come up here," whatever. And I texted him back. I'm like, it's Chicago and Boston, two teams I hate. Who am I going to root for in that game? Like, why would I bother, I mean, that's...
Yeah.
It is going to be an interesting experience, and it's going to be classic. I think somewhat akin to when the Hockey Classic, or the Winter Classic, rather, came to the Big House a couple of years ago. And
yes.
you look at some of the...
I think it'll be similar to that.
Yes. I think it's really going to be kind of a magical kind of a thing. You have an excellent chance of getting some snow on New Year's Day, right about here in the Midwest. I mean, they're right about level with where I'm sitting on America's North Coast. So the chances of getting snow are always pretty good. There have been some other venues for the years to come that have come up recently as far as being speculated, not least of which good old Ohio Stadium, which I can tell you, as somebody who goes there just about every year, it's not going to be the same electricity that it is for Ohio State football, but it would still be something pretty sweet to see there. So that's potentially on the list in the next couple of years for the league. What are some of the ones that you think they may be coming to in the years to come?
Well, I do like the idea of the Ohio State one. I mean, I have driven through there once and saw the stadium and that city that they call a school, and I do think that would be fun. I kind of, I'm thinking Jerry's World down in Dallas.
Wow,
that
yeah.
would be good. Because you don't have to worry about the heat so much. Then I mean, that's a good thing. I think they can get that place going for it, and because. Is that one full dome or is it partial? I can't remember.
I think it's retractable.
That's what I think too. So yeah.
The issue with that would be you don't have a lot of lag time between. You're looking at the Cotton Bowl always being right around that period of time. The fact that they've moved the rest of the New Year's 6 games off of December 31st, except for years when it would fall on that and it wouldn't be in a position like this year, like the national semifinals and the other New Year's 6 games are December 29th. So that's Saturday. So you're looking ahead then to the Tuesday the 1st. So something like that. You know more about that than I do. What kind of challenges would that present?
Games, you could make it January 3rd, 4th, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's, as far as the lag time that it would take. But, yeah, no, that's a natural one right there. That's one of the only places south of the good old Manson-Nixon line where you could really see them doing it because of the capacity with the dome there and everything. Subsequently, you would wonder along similar lines.
I'll give you the team to match up against, too. I would do, if I did that, I would go Colorado, Dallas, because I then have Tyler Seguin. I've got McKinnon, Rantanen. I've got a lot of firepower that way. Jamie Benn. There's some good star power.
Well, not only that, I mean, the most decorated part of the history of both teams coincided right around before and after the turn of the century. That was a pretty good rivalry. So, that's the first thing I think of when you say Colorado and Dallas. So it makes sense in that way.
Yep.
You got to start thinking also too, and the way that the league is always looking at their whole. A Southern strategy that Richard Nixon would be envious of here. But as far as the Sun Belt and everything like that, you got to think once the stadiums get done in Las Vegas and Los Angeles along similar lines, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, I could see Vegas. I didn't enjoy that one at Dodger Stadium. Watching it was kind of like painful, fake with the palm trees and stuff. I wasn't digging that. I think the ice was very good. But I could see Vegas, and Vegas does cool down at night, so that would be good. Although it would be a Raider setting, which the Jet fan base sort of bristles a little that it would be in that. But I can get past it. I was in Gillette Stadium, as you know, so if I could do that, I certainly could pass the test for that. So I think that's good. I still would like to see a place like West Point. I mean, West Point in New York is really scenic, and it's amazing, and there's just a lot of history up there. I mean, their football stadium isn't the biggest, but it still would be a fun venue. It would sort of be like the same thing that they did when they did it last year in Bethesda. I mean, that's not the biggest place either.
You raise an excellent point, because the Bethesda one, a non-winter classic, but an outdoor game. I know it was on a Saturday night because I remember I was watching that with my monthly poker club. And that would be, especially the way these teams are doing in the standings these days. Imagine West Point if it's Buffalo and Toronto. That would be insane.
That'd be good. Or you go Buffalo Rangers again. Either way, or Rangers Islanders if you want to, do that again. Or I think any of those kinds of choices are good. Or even Rangers Leafs, go original 6, drag the Leafs up there. That may be the best.
Yeah.
You do something like that. So I would like that venue. I think that's a nice one. Like I think this year at Lincoln Financial for the Stadium Series will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to some fun with that one. But I'm trying to think, as far as if you're picking out other sort of landmarky ones or ones that some of the other teams could sort of get involved. Which again, unfortunately, I think we always think of, hey, what about this team and that team, but a lot of it comes down to TV ratings and having stars. And so a lot of times we end up creating venues for teams that the league has no interest in, unfortunately.
Well, that's true. Remind me and our listeners, who are the Flyers playing at the Link this year?
The Flyers? That's a good question. Oh, no, Penguins. They're playing the Penguins.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And that's one that the locals will be pretty fired up for and beard up for. And, that would be a great, actually, special edition of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They should do an episode around that. But
no, you know what? I don't watch the show. I was at a game where I was trying to write a piece, and they were filming 5 seconds of the show. And so for an hour to an hour and a half before the game starts, which is good quiet time, they had everybody screaming and yelling. So now I kind of hate the show because of that.
The funny thing is, I immediately know the one you're talking about because I I won't say a completist because a completist means one time around. I think I've watched the entire series like 5 or 6 times around. So, and some episodes more than that. We actually did a thing where I rated all 133 episodes top to bottom on the show, and that was before this most present season. I got to do an updated one now that they've done another season since then. But that's I did not know of your distaste for that program. That's hilarious. But
yes, I was there watching them tape that moment, and it was a really bad moment in my life. Let's just put it that way.
I'll laugh harder the next time I watch that episode of it. That's funny, knowing the backstory. Well, I guess that's as good of a place to start as any, because when you're talking about turmoil around the league early on here, and we've seen a decent amount of it, and a lot of it has fallen right in your backyard there with Philly. So whether it be in Chicago with Quenneville, which I found to be kind of shocking, and a real what have you done for me lately kind of a deal. When you look at it in Edmonton, which I guess is a little bit less surprising based on the way they tanked last year. So all around the league early on, we are seeing patience is wearing very thin in a lot of places.
Well, last year, no coach or GM was fired in season, and so like now this year it's the opposite. And so what we're seeing now is just the remnants of the post-Ed Snyder era, because Ron was brought in while Ed Snyder was still alive. Mm-hmm. And now, Dave Scott is with Comcast, and Comcast owns the team, and so this is now the function of that. So things have changed. They want to rush the rebuild. They felt like it's taken too long, although there's a hardened and true average of 5 years for most players to get to the NHL from the time they're drafted. Mm-hmm. That is on average. That's not including the guys that, Darlene's and, even Dennis Blowski gets there in a couple of years. Like, those guys are the exception, but the rule is 5. And on this week's show for Hockey Prospect Radio, we had Jarmo Kekalainen on from Columbus, and he said his rule is for impact in the NHL 5 to 8.
Wow.
And I think he's right too. Because if you really think about it, like a lot of times goalies, for a goalie to have the impact in the NHL, a lot of times they're 24 years old.
Right.
You go look, they're 23, 24. If you're getting a good college player, let's say forward or defenseman, if he goes 3 years and then a year in the AHL, well, we're talking 23 then, right?
Right.
So, it is true. I mean, and some guys like Dylan Strome maybe get traded too early because he's 22. It hasn't happened for him. So now it may happen in Chicago. And, so that's sort of where the Flyers are at. Chuck Fletcher was in town recently, and so he got the first interview. Will he be the last interview? We don't know. And so that's an interesting one because he has a history. Bobby Clark hired him in Florida way back then.
Right.
And he has a history with Joel Quenneville. So does that give him the inside track now because, they feel like he could call up his old buddy Joel and get him the coach? I don't really know the answer to that. I think Quenneville does want to coach this year. We heard that, that's his intent. But, he doesn't have to. He's getting paid $6 million. He could wait till next year, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, I was just going to say, the funny thing is, and he's a heck of a lot more accomplished, but same thing with Hugh Jackson. All this whole thing of like, hey, Hugh is entitled to go work somewhere. Yeah, but he's also getting paid, and what he's making there is just getting subtracted out of his head coaching money that he's still getting paid. So you raise an excellent point about Joel Quenneville. These contracts are guaranteed. Yeah, they're guaranteed contracts.
Just to flip sports for just a moment.
Yeah.
I might argue that about Hugh Jackson, that he deserves to work again, because I'm not sure he does, and I think Baker Mayfield's behind me with that one. So...
Well, look, I don't know why he cares about it, but I'm not going to begrudge Baker Mayfield for saying it because, first and foremost, as a lifelong Browns fan, it's refreshing that he cares, and it's refreshing that he's good enough to lift a team. So I'm going to give him plenty of leeway on that. And I just see a lot of people in the media trying to make themselves relevant by ragging on Baker Mayfield. There's been a lot of clickbait this week, a lot of hot takes. No. Yeah. But I hear you on that. Yeah, but I actually agree with you.
Stance on it, like, hey, this guy left us
right
in season, he's with another team, and now he's trying to be my buddy after the game, and I didn't really want to go for that. Like, I'm okay with that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you on that. And the whole thing of, like, everybody go, like, Hugh Jackson deserves to work. Again, number one, not sure I agree with that. Look at the track record. Second of all...
Yeah, I'm not sure he deserves to work again. He was horrible.
He's not making any more money by working. The money that he's making is just getting subtracted from his Browns contract. So the whole, like, Crimea River, it's the same thing with Quenneville. I mean, now Quenneville, I think, was much more unjustifiably hired. Quenneville, I would liken that to another Cleveland coach, as I believe I did on your Facebook page at the time, my man Ty Lue, who got done dirty by Dan Gilbert. What have you done for me lately? The only head coach to win a championship in Cleveland in 52 years, see you, wouldn't want to be you. And it's, for Quenneville, who, again, Quenneville, where were the Blackhawks before he came along? Now, it's interesting. I'm going crazy making analogies with Joel Quenneville and other sports, but the way that I kind of liken it, I'm going to go one better. You know who he reminds me of? Is Joe Torre. Because when Torre went to the Yankees, you just kind of yawned, right? Like, who knew he had that run in him? It's the same thing with Quenneville with the Blackhawks.
I mean, he did make the playoffs with the Braves, and I think once with the Cardinals. But he obviously had great players with the Yankees, so he was able to do it.
Right, and that's the thing with Quenneville. Like, they hired Quenneville, and that was the Red Wings were still in the division, so I was like, I'm not really sweating that move that much. Well, he proved me wrong, and he had a great run there. And, I mean, I think he would really benefit Philadelphia. But it's one of these things here, when you talk about the developmental curve and how long it takes guys to come up, and that's what leads to cycles of teams being up and down. Are we seeing, especially when you see this year, now Pittsburgh's already sort of getting out of somewhat of the depths of where they were, although they still have a lot of problems at goalie. But between them, L.A., and Chicago, the team that have dominated the Stanley Cups this decade, and putting over L.A. out of the three, that's the only one that doesn't make me throw up in my mouth a little bit to acknowledge what they did. The other two, not so much. But, scoreboard, they've had it this decade. You look at last year, the rise of Winnipeg. I called it this year that Calgary was going to be up there. I don't know that any of us called that it was going to be Buffalo rising up this quickly, but you and I talked about them off air. Toronto in the last year or so. Are we seeing a changing of the guard of the teams that were down early and middle part of the decade rising up, the teams that were the powers kind of in the pits? Or L.A. looks like they're going to be down for a little bit now. Do Chicago and Pittsburgh, I guess, have any chance of bucking that?
Well, Pittsburgh always does. I mean, you still have Malkin and Crosby, and when you do, and Letang. So when you do still have a chance, because that does affect a fair part of the game. Not enough, but a fair amount.
Right.
Chicago, I would have said pre-trades, no way, but they got a 2-for-1 out of Arizona, and I think they get hit on both. And so if they do hit on both with Perlini and Dylan Strome, then I got to tell you that could get them back in business. Their defense is still not good. Mm-hmm. That's still going to be a weak spot, but they might be able to cover enough ills with Corey Crawford back that they could squeak out a last-minute spot. So they may have a chance. The Kings have no chance right now. I think if they trade Ilya Kovalchuk, which I was not behind that signing. If they trade him, he gets some good assets. They had Cal Peterson, who they brought up as a young goalie. He's really good. I mean, I watched him with Notre Dame for years, and I think he's the real deal. If they do that, quick, whenever he comes back, maybe they deal him. They could get back in the game fairly quick because, and no pun intended there, but they could because they do still have a decent pipeline of rookies. I mean, Gabe Velarde probably would have played this year, but he got a concussion in camp, and he's still not playing.
Right.
So that's just one of those bizarre situations where they draft a young kid. He could be an all-star every year, but, he has a tough year because of the concussion, so we may not see him this year now as a result, or at least there this year. So, yeah, they possibly could. But otherwise, you are seeing a changing. Now, the problem with the Flyers is, and what I liken the turnaround for them is, when you try to turn the rebuild around, it's kind of like when I had a Chevy Vega, but if I had a Chevy Camaro and you got it fixed up to the point where, you got the primer paint and then that's it, right? That's all, you're out of money, that's what you're rolling with. I think, they're at the point now where they had the primer paint and and they're changing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little bit tricky, and it's probably a lot of bit tricky. And so I can't guarantee that that's going to work. I don't know what direction exactly they're going to go in, but I think with the Eagles winning last year and the 76ers now looking good and trading for Jimmy Butler, and they play in that same building, and I think Flyers management saw that and said, the Sixers were building all these years, and now they did that, but it's only building for 12 players. That's a little bit easier.
Right.
I think that's where now the mindset is. Now, again, there were things said by Dave Scott like, hey, let's spend to the cap. Okay. I mean, that's not the mark of a winner if you spend to the cap necessarily, but that's fine because Ron Hextall didn't, so if you want to be the opposite of that, fine. I don't know if that helps you. They are excited about the trading deadline. Okay, I mean, you do have Wayne Simmons that you could trade. That's fine. But, tell everybody that you're excited about that. I'm not sure that helps the market for you, but they did. So, I don't know. I don't know what happens when the next guy comes in, what the philosophy is. Nobody knows what the philosophy is. Dave Haxtell, remarkably is still there. They did fire Gordon Murphy yesterday, and the defense was in shambles. So I think that firing was just. I didn't think the firing was just for Chris Pryor, who was there for a very long time, was the assistant GM, the last probably 4 years. I think that was something that's going to come back and bite him because he did a great job. But all that said, we don't know who's coming in, right? So we don't know who's coming in, but Dave Haxtell's there. But if Fletcher comes in and he makes a call to Quenneville, Dave Haxtell won't be there much longer.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
it's really tenuous.
Yeah, very much so. And again, you talk about where they are in that market. If Manny Machado or Bryce Harper ends up coming there this off season, you're looking at the Flyers being fourth in that market for a time to come. Maybe fifth. I think our friend Joe Stazak would say probably fifth behind Villanova basketball, and I think he'd probably have a point.
I thought he was going to count the Union. Or at least he didn't do that.
Yeah, could be.
They could be behind Villanova basketball, but I don't think so. I think there's a lot of Flyers fans that are just a little bit upset and a little bit dormant, but there are some shows, and there's a host on Joe's station, Mike Missinelli, that literally just, defies hockey calls. He doesn't want them. He doesn't know anything about it. Even today, he was just like, look, if I'm retired, I would never watch it. Like that, if you're a good hockey fan, you don't want to call that guy, right? So I don't think you could always gauge the interest that way via sports talk radio.
Right.
But I do think they're going to try and make a splash of some sort, whether it be now, could they be going after William Nylander last minute? They could be. I think they're going to try and do something to sort of revive the fan base. But the fans are, different now. This is stuff that Paul Holmgren is maybe rubber stamping with Dave Scott's, wanting to do it, is stuff that used to work in the old days. Flyers fans right now, they like Stouffville. They like Carter Hart. They don't want to rush Carter Hart. They don't want to, bring in old guys with bad contracts. They're not into that anymore. And so that's a big change for them because there is still some older media in this town that used to like the way Ed Schneider ran things, and it's fine. He ran things really well for a while, but then that just to be in it every year but mortgaging a lot to do that isn't the way to do it anymore, especially in a cap league. So that's where you sort of seen a changing of the philosophy of the fan base, and that's where I think even new management's going to find a big challenge here, because unless you bring in a young star, they bring in Ilya Kovalchuk, it's only going to excite about 15% of the fan base. If you brought in someone, like Gabriel Landeskog, like maybe a couple of years ago when things were toiling there, if you could have gotten them, that's a whole different story. Then they'd be all in, right?
Right.
Excuse me. Now, the Machado thing, I'll just mention this briefly because I think it's important.
Uh-huh.
Jimmy Rollins used to practically get run out of town for not running the ball out.
Right.
Regardless of what Machado said, in the World Series, he had a clear home run shot that just didn't go out of the park, and he turned it into a single.
Mm-hmm.
He does that in Philly. People are going to go crazy, especially if he's making $30 million a year doing that. So I would stay far away from Manny Machado if I were Phillies management because of that. Bryce Harper's fine, but I did an article and I put it up on Sportsology, and I even said, if I'm the Phillies, I guess that's the guy I go for. But the problem is, Bryce Harper, like at his age, fastest up with 200 homers, he would be somewhere like 7th or 8th all time. Like, he is not a phenom.
Right.
People just over-exaggerate really what he is. Ryan Howard got there faster. I think Ralph Krenner has gotten there faster. There's quite a few players, and he's not one of them, and he's not there yet either. I think he's 194. So, to me, that's a big deal. Like, if I'm putting that kind of money, $400 million into a player, I would hope that he's going to be an all-timer. I would give that money to Mike Trout. I really wouldn't give it to Bryce Harper. But anyhow,
well, yeah.
We go back to...
Well, hey, the last thing I'll say about that is Harper is more of an all-around player than a couple guys you name. I mean, he's way more of an all-around player than Ryan Howard ever was, that's for sure. So, there's that angle of it as well. You mentioned Nylander. Let's talk about that for a little bit, because this is a situation you don't see every day, where you've got a young, big-time restricted free agent out there sitting there unsigned. I agree with you about Philly and Kovalchuk. That guy's not worth much of anything to a team like that unless you're throwing in a time machine. But since that is unlikely to occur, no, you shouldn't want any part of Kovalchuk, because he is not going to save your season. But a guy like Nylander, how do you see this shaking out? I have a hard time seeing him sitting out for the year. That is a possibility as the clock is ticking here.
He's not the NHL. He'll end up joining the KHL or Swedish Hockey League or something like that.
Yeah.
He won't sit out, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, but, financially he will, because whatever he makes there is not going to be, on par. So, yeah, point well taken. He's not going to be rusty sitting there eating ho-hos. He'll be out doing something. But, in terms of the available scenarios
he's not
of him...
He's not going to be like Dustin Penner. He's not going to hit IHOP every night.
No, exactly. So, but between the possibility of him taking a little overseas trip there, going back with the Leafs, getting traded somewhere. Supposedly the Leafs are trying to stir up the trade talks right about now, which makes sense, right? See what's out there, see what teams are willing to give you. And
right.
Again, they're in a situation where, as much as Brendan Shanahan's trying to do the whole take one for the team as though it's 98 and he's dealing with the unselfish Red Wings, these players ain't wanting to hear that. So, it's going to be interesting.
Babcock has only in the last couple of days put a lot of pressure on Kyle Dubas by just mentioning Nylander each and every day, where he wasn't mentioning him at all. So, because, Mike Babcock doesn't care about the salary cap. Mike Babcock doesn't care about the future payroll. Mike Babcock just cares about getting the best player. So he's trying to steer that, and, that's putting pressure too. I'll say this. I brought Philly back up with the Nylander talks because, there were scouts here for a while from Toronto watching, and maybe it was for Travis Sanheim, maybe it was for Shane Gostisbehere, maybe it was for Wayne Simmons, or two of them. And maybe it's like a 2-for-2 deal, and the Flyers get somebody from like the Marlies But the interesting part to me was that went dead, and it seemed like Ron Hextall didn't want to do that. And then, Ron Hextall gets fired down. Literally the next game after he is relieved of his duties, there is a Leaf scout back in the building. Mm-hmm. So, you have an owner that's willing to spend money here. He's saying he doesn't care if he spends the cap. So even though no team was previously interested in giving away Nylander $8 million, what if all of a sudden the Flyers are? So then maybe, they get the Leafs to sign him and they do a sign and trade. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Carolina wasn't going to spend as much. So if he's going to go to Carolina, that's probably going to be off of a sign and trade sort of bridge deal, 2 or 3 years, and then Nylander hits the open market at some point. But it'd still be around $7 million, which is a little high for anybody. I mean, it really would be. But I don't know if Carolina would do that, but they might, because Tom Dundon's, looking to make a splash too, and, they have Brett Pesce and Jake Bean just got a call up there. So they have a plethora of defensemen. I mentioned Justin Falk, or if I didn't, I'll mention him now. So they have a plethora of defensemen, so there's a lot of choices there. So, that's another team. I really think he's going to get traded. I think he's going to be signed and traded, whether it's a sign and trade deal, whether, however they term it and do it, that's what I think is going to happen. Is there a chance he sits out? Yes, there's definitely a chance, and then he goes to either the KHL or the Swedish Hockey League. But even so, let's say he even goes back to the Leafs last minute. They're not getting him for weeks. He's literally skating with like a Finnish junior team right now. So he would have to leave there, come back here, pass his physical, and then go on a conditioning assignment for at least a couple of games, he would have to get a couple of games in and then join the Leafs wherever they are. So, or any other team that he joins. So you're still looking weeks away from him playing in the NHL, even if it happens on or before Saturday. But it's a big deal. It's funny because I did call the fact that this would be lengthy. I know some people didn't believe it, maybe because the Leafs, have a lot of money and they have a great team. But we all forget, or some forget, that Michael Nylander used to do this all the time with his contracts. Michael Nylander's the dad. That is his son. The son's only 22 years old. The dad acts like an agent, says he's an agent. I don't know if he's really a certified agent, but he's certainly his advisor. And again, you go think about what you used to be like when you were 22 with your dad. And if your dad has already been there before and is maybe saying to you, don't blink here, you're going to win this, yeah, it could all just blow up. And then Michael Nylander just, did his son a disservice, which would be the first time a dad did that to their son who felt like they knew more than, the agents or the teams, because he's a young player. He's still a kid.
True, yes. But, the one thing you say is that, taking a while to get in there or whatever, I do see the flip side of the coin.
I took the long route, sorry.
Well, but no, well, I'm going to reference, one of the things I love talking about again, which I did a minute ago, the 98 Red Wings, because I think back to, in a somewhat similar situation, I'll tell you what, man, in the playoffs, Sergei Fedorov was still skating like he was shot out of a cannon. So it can benefit you in the long haul. If this Toronto team is looking to go on any kind of a playoff run, those fresh legs may be something they're really appreciating right around then. I will say this also, too, in terms of what you had said about the message that Babcock sent. As a longtime both Cavs and Red Wings fan, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. I don't know if Mike Babcock, as far as sending messages through the media, I don't know if Mike Babcock steals a page out of LeBron's book or LeBron steals a page out of Mike Babcock's book, but those guys should teach university courses on sending messages through the media, because they are both par excellence at that. By the way, on a similar note here,
think about it. He's the highest paid coach.
Yeah.
With like an ironclad deal.
Yeah.
Like he feels pretty safe.
Yeah, they both deal from the sense of security that, again, you could say that they've earned off of their track record, but they certainly throw it around an awful lot. And I will say, too, I do have a wonderful marketing idea. It'll mostly sell around the North Coast these days, I think. A T-shirt that says, "Cavs and Red Wings fan, please be nicer to me than I was to you."
Oh. I still think you should be nicer to Keith Hernandez, but that's just me.
Well, and I did have to revisit.
Keith did apologize this year. I told you he did for Cleveland. On one broadcast, he said, "Yeah, it didn't work out. Sorry, Cleveland." Like, he did say that.
Well, I would have preferred that he outright admitted to stealing money, but okay, that's part way. I will say, too, by the way, I used to lump him in with the other guy that he does the Just for Men commercials with, Walt Frazier, but I believe Clyde did give us a little more than I thought. I mean, I was like a real little kid at the time.
You have to remember,
yeah.
Clyde played a long time under a lot of pressure, and he never missed games.
Right.
By the time you got Clyde, it was sort of like getting, let's see, who would be a good guy? Like O.J. Simpson in San Francisco with a little bit more tread on that tire.
Okay. Are we talking roughly equivalent to, I think it was like in '87 when the Tribe got Phil Niekro and Steve Carlton? Are we talking somewhat similar? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, Clyde could still dish it. He wasn't as fast. He's never going to turn the ball over, and he was always smart. He wasn't going to be able to play the big minutes that he used to. But he was still a good defensive player, too. He always was.
Yeah, he was. And like I said, I did have to revisit after watching some old Cavs footage on YouTube on that. Something to
I'm glad you at least took Clyde out of that group.
Well, I wasn't going out of my way to do that, but I was watching old Cavs stuff, and I just couldn't help but notice that he didn't look like as big of a stiff as I remembered or heard that he was. So I was like, okay, I will reconsider on that. But as far as reconsidering, there might be some who were prematurely shoveling dirt on the two teams last playing for the Cup in June, the two last teams standing, D.C. and Vegas, respectively. Both have been doing a little bit better recently. Interesting to me, I have no idea what the methodology is for Sportsline. They have Washington, and I can understand this, they have Washington projected at a 99.5% chance of making the playoffs. I guess that makes sense. Interesting that in the Pacific, which is super jammed up, they still have Vegas at the highest odds, even though they're like in fourth place at the moment, a 90.1 chance of making the postseason. I don't know how much I agree with that, because I think that race could be going among a number of teams all year long. They only have Vancouver.
That one's tougher.
Yeah, they have Vancouver at 3.4%, despite being 2 points back of them presently. I would kind of concur a little bit, though. I kind of see where they're going, because Vancouver was at an unsustainable start, to be sure. But
right, and if you look at it, like the worst place to be, like when we talked about the Flyers, is to be like 6 or 8 points out of the playoffs and near the bottom in the conference, right? That's never a good place to be.
Right.
But that's where we are in the National Hockey League when you have the loser point. So there's nothing you could really do about that. I think the Capitals would be fine. I'm not worried about the Capitals. You knew they'd get off to a slow start. All that Wilson stuff. They're starting to pick up steam. They will continue to pick up steam. They'll be around. Now, Vegas, I did say I think they would make the playoffs, but they are a bubble team, and I figure they're going to take one of the bottom slots, because I knew they were going to, have a trouble at the beginning of the year. They, they lost their defenseman to Pete Eads and Nate Schmidt, and so there was that. They're not going to be as good as last year, because that was just everybody had an edge to them. Carlson wasn't going to shoot for 43 goals and some crazy 25% shooting percentage that he had, like that was, or even higher than that. That was not sustainable. So clearly, and that's definitely slowed down. All those things, some injuries, Marc-Andre Fleury not being what he was last year, which we've seen Berg in his little later years go up and down a bit. All that taken into consideration, and the fact that the Pacific is jammed. So now Stastny's out. He's been out for a while. So all those things, I think they're going to struggle to make it in. 90% seems high.
Yeah, and, playoff bubble team is what I said coming into the year. And, again, the interesting thing is that playoff bubble team, I mean, that would have seemed like an insane ceiling for year one, and yet they pushed far beyond it. So, it's one of these things where
teams gave them players. They look at Alex Tuck. Alex Tuck is tremendous. Minnesota gave them Alex Tuck to stay away from their defenseman. Okay, but Alex Tuck is a great player.
Right.
He's a really great young player. Like, they just got too many players for free. Seattle's not going to be so lucky.
No, that's true. That's true, and that's believe me, again. For Cleveland not having an NHL team, I've sure found a lot of ways to sneak in self-pity tonight. I'll do it one more time. It could be the same kind of thing.
Barons talk? You don't want to go Cleveland Barons talk?
A fine heritage that was for all of the 2 years that we were in the NHL there. Do have a lot of Calder Cups, though, as has been pointed out over the years. We do have a lot of those from the Crusaders and whatnot, but... Yeah. It is somewhat similar to the worst thing that could have happened to the 99 Browns was the 96 success of both Carolina and Jacksonville. So I think Seattle had to be looking at that with Vegas just cringing, because the league certainly, and again, believe me, it's not like the Browns did anything with what they had. I'm not letting the Al Lerner regime off the hook. But the league basically screwed them after being potentially overly generous to the other two teams. If I'm Seattle, I had to be cringing watching what happened with Vegas last year.
Also, if you want to be a real Browns fan, which I think you are, their drafting's been awful up until this year. Just awful.
Although, this year is stirring up memories of the class of 78 with Clay Matthews, Ozzie Newsome, etc. This year, they seem to have done an awful lot well. And Nick Chubb...
that's why I stopped. You noticed I stopped at that line. But how many quarterbacks have they passed up in the last couple of years?
Oh, I think even outside of Cleveland, people are familiar with the meme with all the jerseys being crossed out and everything like that. So it seems that we have stopped that streak. Would that you guys were so lucky. I'll tell you this, I was right about Sam Darnold, but I was also right that you guys might ruin Sam Darnold. I don't hold him responsible for much of any of that.
No, I mean, again, I did want him to start him right away. They did. I do think it was good that he missed the Patriots, though. We'll see what he does this week. And there is talent there. There's no question there's some talent there, but there's no question that he needs a better offensive line and needs a little fostering. McCown aside, which I'm sure he's a great guy to talk to. We'll see about next year. I do think he could be better than Chad Pennington, though. I don't know. He's not going to be Joe Namath, but I think he's going to be better than Pennington. And if he reaches Ken O'Brien's status or even a little higher, that's fine. Because, again, people forget Ken O'Brien led the league in passing one year with Dan Marino. He certainly could throw a lot of touchdowns, but he, got sacked an inordinate too many times in his career, too. And so that shortened it a bit with a bad shoulder, but he had some really good years.
Oh, yeah. And I think Darnold's still got a very, very high ceiling, and based on whatever happens, I think got a chance to be very good. I'm going to bring it around to this here in terms of looking at the teams in the league, and we talked about a little bit of the changing of the guard and the things that have been happening, and part of that ties into the whole Canadian issue, because cyclically for a long period of time there were few, if any, Canadian teams that were challenging to end that Stanley Cup drought that has been going on and on. I picked, for my preseason prediction this year, Winnipeg over Tampa in the finals, so I picked the drought to end. But as you're looking at the standings now, you've got Calgary in the mix. I thought Calgary would come back strongly this year, and they have. So you've got them in the mix. Obviously, everybody's always going to talk about Toronto. Montreal is pretty much the early season mirage I thought they'd be, and that they often are. So you're looking at 2, maybe 3 teams that have a strong chance to make it there. If it's Toronto, Winnipeg, you might be seeing NBC Sports executives hanging themselves over the ratings. But up north, that would be the wildest thing ever, is if one of those 2 teams, basically if they were battling to be the team that was going to end the drought. But, I still say, and, Winnipeg, they're in the toughest division. They're in a strong dogfight right now just to make a playoff.
They've been a little up and down so far. I mean, they haven't been great now.
Right, but I mean, I still, I love their chances. Sportsline, for what it's worth, has still got them as a 93.5% chance of making the playoffs.
Oh, they're making the playoffs. I mean, that's, you don't need Sportsline for that.
Oh, I know. Here's what's funny. This doesn't all add up, because they're saying Nashville 97.3. That sounds about right. Colorado 88.5. Minnesota 89.7. So there's your 4 teams, right? Well, you also got...
all right, so 2 things there.
Yeah.
2 things there. How in the world can Colorado only be 88.5 when they have the best line in hockey and getting great goaltending and good defense? Like, that's just silly. The Minnesota one, I am going to take full credit for because preseason I picked them to come out of the West. I'm just letting you know that.
Interesting. Okay. Well, here's what's funny. I'm looking at it and I'm going, they got Dallas at 58.9%. So they actually have 5 teams in the Central with a 58% or better chance of making the playoffs. Now, when you look at the mediocrity that is the Pacific Division, along a good part of it anyways, I guess that makes sense, but it's fascinating that they have those 5 teams there. But regardless, Winnipeg, whether it's 4 teams, whether it's 5, gonna be one of them. Toronto making it in the East. I still think Calgary makes it in the West. I'm going to stay with that prediction. And again, could be a Calgary-Winnipeg Western Conference final. Stranger things have happened. So I say better than 50-50 chance it's a Canadian team this year. What do you think?
I'm going to go under 50, but because I have Minnesota coming out of the West. Okay. So that's going to eliminate a fair amount. I do think the Leafs, their defense isn't really good enough, so they don't have a great shot. Montreal's not going to do it. So unless I'm wrong about Minnesota and they lose to someone like Calgary or someone like that along the way, I give it a 40% chance. I think it could be Tampa and Minnesota. Like right now, if you put a gun to my head, that's who I'm going to tell you. And so we'll see. I mean, that's what I'm looking at.
Fascinating. Okay, I'm going to stay with Winnipeg over Tampa. I will stay with that as my prediction for the year. So we will see how that pans out. But a pleasure, as always, Russ, having you on. Of course, everything that you've always got going on with Sportsology, with the Hockey Prospects show on Sirius XM Radio. Always got books going. What's your next thing going to be with the books?
Well, I do still want to sell Pioneers of Baseball.
That too, yes.
Let people know that. That's still out there for the holidays. They can go to Amazon or a lot of other places online and get that, or you could DM me at Sportsology on Twitter, and I could sell you a signed copy. It's a college hockey book. We don't even have a title for it yet, but that'll come. But it's going to be like a collection of great college hockey stories. So that's the one we're working on now.
Excellent. I was at my first game in quite a long time. It was about a year or 2 ago. Went up with a buddy of mine who's an alum to Bowling Green and watched a very spirited Bowling Green Ohio State game.
Ohio State's a good team. I mean, last year they were a great team, actually.
Yeah. Well, and BG as well. I mean, it's been a while to crack the tournament. Haven't done it in a while, but perennially on the bubble. And it's my mom's alma mater, so I have a soft spot, and I think there's a decent chance that drought's going to end in the next year or so as far as making the tournament. I look forward to getting back up there and watching some good hockey. Of course, the Harvard on the Hocking, my alma mater, Ohio University, always way up there in the world of club hockey. I can't let this go by without a plug for those guys. Past national champions, a perennial powerhouse on the club hockey ice. I used to cover that for the school newspaper back in the day, back from up in the bird's nest. Oh, yeah. I used to love it.
Did you have a pencil in your ear and a little thing on your hat? Was that the look?
Yeah, I had a little fedora that had a card that said press on it. I went all the way. So
that's great.
Yeah, college hockey. That's excellent. I look forward to that. And yes, Pioneers of Baseball. Go read it, if only for, me being a homer, if only for the excellent little blurb in there about Napoleon Lajoie of my Cleveland Indians. And an excellent read.
He's a forgotten guy in a lot of ways. I mean, he's not forgotten because he's in the Hall of Fame, but he doesn't get brought up like during broadcasts that much. And I don't know if it's because he's French or it's just so long ago, but this guy was an amazing player. He really was. Well,
he doesn't even get brought up in town here. I only know about him because I'm a baseball nerd. You're not going to get anybody, even in Cleveland, to have any kind of sense of who he was. I mean, if he played for the Browns or something, I suppose it'd be a different story. But yeah, anything early 20th century Cleveland Indians, people are not going to really know that off the top of their head.
They want to talk about Omar Vizquel and.
Should Omar be in the Hall of Fame? Better. Yeah, that's what people want to talk about, and
I know.
All of that good kind of stuff.
Can't do it, sorry.
Yeah.
Thumbs down to that.
I love Omar too, but I'm with you on that. You got to be. I'm the guy who's always screeched about can we rip Rabbit Moranville's plaque out of the Hall of Fame? What was he, like a 258 lifetime hitter? I mean, that's not to hate on the guy personally, but yeah, you got to be a two-dimensional player. In my estimation, and with the plate being maybe the predominant dimension of the two. And Omar was, respectable, but respectable is not Hall of Fame. So I agree with you. But
and Victor Martinez won't get there either, but nobody's expecting that.
No, nobody's expecting that. A fine player.
Really good player.
A really good player. Somebody I have a soft spot for. Wish him all the best in his retirement. And again, wish you all the best in your continuing coverage of hockey, baseball, and everything in between, my man. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Always fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Russ. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to FDH Lounge Mini Episode number 1067.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.